Hi, it's Ryan. This is fairly obviously a 1541 drive. When I got this, it was very, very dirty, and there was actually inside there was a straw, like from one of the old drink boxes, old juice boxes, rattling around in there. That thing could have been in there for 20 years, but amazingly it still worked. But obviously it needed some TLC, so I took it apart, cleaned everything, I replaced all the electrolytic capacitors. What I didn't do though is I haven't changed the main belt. So I'm going to take it apart, going to lube the rails, clean the head again, and then switch out the drive belt. So before we get started, one thing I always do, if I'm moving them around a lot, I put in a head protector. Now this is basically just a very thin piece of cardboard, more like cardstock, basically the size of a floppy disk, but then you've got this tab that's a little bit offset. This is actually an original head vibration protector. Closer. I don't use this one anymore, but I used it as a template to make the other ones. So anytime I've got a drive in storage or I'm moving it around, I always keep one of these in there, just to be on the safe side. Okay, so let's take this thing apart, see what we've got. We'll take the top case off, put that off to the side, and you can see what we have here is we've got a metal shield on top. You can see the main circuit board here, and then the drive mechanism and the power supply underneath. We got to remove all this to get underneath the drive to get the belt off. Okay. Now I took out the screws, getting a little sticky there. Now what I like to do, just to make sure that I don't lose pieces, is when I take the screws out or I take little pieces off, I put them in these small snack bags, smaller than regular sandwich bags, with a little label in there that says what they go to. So these are the case screws, so they go in there, and you can put those off to the side. Now we need to remove this metal shield. This actually is in two pieces. You've got a top part and a bottom part. On this side, if you can see, there's just like a couple little dimples here that match into some little holes on the bottom part of the shield. On this side, we just have two screws to take out. And then this will just pop right off. Okay, so we got a good look here at the motherboard. As I said, I've already changed the electrolytic capacitors. Everything else looks good now that it's been cleaned. It was a real mess earlier. Now, one thing that I do when I'm taking things apart is I like to take a picture of it at each step, mostly so that I know how to put it back together again. So I would take a picture of this, for instance, to make sure that all the connectors went back on the right way with the right alignment. I've already done that, so I'm going to go ahead and just pull these off. And carefully with the black one. Okay. Now this is the connector that brings the power from the power supply underneath up here to the main board. Now we just remove a few screws here and the top board will come right off. One other thing here before we can remove this. We have two screws right here that we have to take off that go into this heatsink. And now this will pop right off of there. You can see it seems to be in pretty good shape. Okay, looks good. Now we have here, you can see all the wiring here in the back, the main transformer, power, it's going to come up to the motherboard, got the switch, got the fuse, the power cord jack over here. Let me spin this around a bit so you can see it better. Got the drive mechanism, got the head here, motor. Okay, now the transformer and the drive mechanism are both screwed to this bottom shield, and in order to get the drive mechanism out we have to remove the shield because there's a couple of screws down here on either side that we simply can't get to because of the side of the case. So the whole shield's got to come up first, which is, again, is pretty simple. Just a few screws. Okay, now we just lift this up and out. So you got the bottom case here, the LED here in the front. There's no real reason to remove that, so I'm just going to leave it in there. And we'll just set the bottom case off to the side. Now, in order to get the drive mechanism out, we've got two screws in here on either side, and there's a little area here in this black plastic where it slides in, and you've got these overhanging tabs up here at the top. So in order to remove this, we've got to take these screws out and then lift the drive mechanism up and slide it out. Now, this just lifts up and slides right out the front here. Okay. I'll set the bottom part off to the side. And take a look at the drive mechanism. Okay, so if we flip this over, we can see the ALPS sticker here, but we already knew that because of the type of latching mechanism it has. Now this is the belt that we need to change. Now it's really simple to do this. It just loops around these two. So all we got to do is just pull that right off. Piece of cake. Now, You can get new belts. I get mine from a store called Console 5. Console and then the numeral 5. You can see there is a clear difference between the old one and the new one. You can see how stretched out this has gotten over the years. Okay. So pretty easy to get this on. You just have to be careful and make sure that it's sitting on the main wheel here. So just hook it on there, stretch it out a little bit, make sure that it's not twisted anywhere, like here. Okay, and then just try to make sure that it is centered on the wheel. This big gray wheel doesn't have any ridges or anything to hold it in place, so you just have to get it on there pretty much in the center. And that's really all there is to it. It's a real easy thing to change, and something that really ought to be done to any of these drives when you're working on them. And the belt is the same whether you're using the ALPS or the Neutronics mechanism. Okay, let's flip this back over. Okay, so now we can pop this out. Alright, and we can see the heads here. So what we need to clean actually is the head here on the bottom, under here. And then we're going to lubricate, you can see these rails right here that the head slides on. Now it is kind of interesting that the head that actually does the reading is here on the underside, which means that when you have a floppy disk, the data is actually written on the bottom of it. Even though the label's on the top, the data is on the bottom. Okay, so we'll dip this in a little isopropyl alcohol, and then we're just going to reach in here. We can lift this top part up if we do it very, very carefully. And then we just gently wipe across the head, and then I like to flip it around and just dry it off a little bit. And you can see the Q-tip is perfectly clean because I just actually cleaned that head not too long ago when I cleaned the rest of the drive. Now, to lube the rails. Lots of different opinions out there on what to lube the rails with. This is what I use. It's called liquid bearings, and it doesn't take much. You've got just a very fine tip here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a couple drops here on the rail on both sides. That's all you really need, is just a couple of drops. Okay, and then we're just going to, I'm going to turn it using this wheel here. Just move it back and forth a little bit. Once I get it all the way up a couple times, I'm going to put a couple drops on the back of the rails. And I'm going to move it again a couple times just to move it over. There we go. And that'll do it. So we've cleaned the head, we've lubed the rails, we've changed the belt, we've changed the capacitors already. So this thing is as good as new as it's going to get. Okay, so now we just start putting everything back together. I'm going to put my card back in, and you can see when I do what it does to the head. You can see it makes contact back here at the back of the head mechanism, and when I push it in, pushes that head right back to the parking position. Now the only thing on this drive that's a little less than perfect is this latching mechanism. Now you can see it'll latch perfectly good, but when you push it down, sometimes it doesn't. It's supposed to go down and then pop forward a little bit to latch in. It goes down enough to hold, but it doesn't always pop out. Let's see if I can get a good shot of this here. You can see where this is at, and if I grab onto this, I can still pull it out a little ways. So I'm not really sure why it's wanting to do that, why it's not automatically popping out. It might be just that the spring isn't as strong as it used to be, but it works, and I don't really see anything else to do with it to make it pop out the rest of the way like it's supposed to. I've cleaned it really well in there. I've even put a little bit of lube in there, and it's still catching a little bit like that. But let's say most of the time it goes down and it'll latch perfectly fine. It's just that you can still pull it forward, you know, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so. Okay, so let's start putting this back together. Okay, first thing we need, get the old drive belt out of the way. Bring our chassis in here. Now again, we got to slide this in kind of from the top and then drop it down. You can see here on the side where there's these like cutout areas where these have to slide into that. So we just slide it in, get everything lined up, drop it down into place. Just have to make sure that the tabs on the bottom shield on the chassis here are on the outside, because they can actually go inside the plastic. So you got to be careful about that. And then we just grab our screws and start reassembling. Set that aside. We get our bottom case. Make sure that we're not pinching any wires. And you need to make sure that this power cord comes out the side of the chassis here. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time getting things to bed. And then these wires come out of the cutout on this side. So we just lay those out like that. And we reattach this part. Alright, now we put the motherboard back on. Again, make sure we're going in the right way. Okay. The heat sink has to sit inside of the chassis. Okay, and you can see why we had to be careful about where the wires went, because if they didn't come through this cutout, they'd get pinched by the motherboard, and the same over here with this power wire. So now it's just a question of putting all of our wires back. Most of these wires, these cables, are, the wires have kind of formed into shape, so pretty easy to tell where they go even without a picture. Make sure especially that the wires that go to that LED are tucked down in there, because you don't want to pinch them against the case when we put the top part of the case back on. Alright, now for the top shield. So, just get this lined up. And now the case. Again, making sure that those LED wires stay inside and don't get pinched by the case. And there we go. Now let's hook it up and make sure everything works. Okay, so right now I have the drive hooked up to my 128, so let's take out the protector. And I've got a disc here with some programs on that was written for the VIC-20 that I've got sitting over there next to it. And we'll turn everything on in the right order. Drive spins up nicely. And there we go. One working 1541 disk drive. Okay, well, thanks for your time.